The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Saturdays or Sundays, SOR Media, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of SOR Media is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised. Are you experienced? Then come own the night with us.
Little brother has taken control, shoveling dirt in every hole. Predators to condemn your soul, watching you and watching me. We're all
Station atop the mountains of British Columbia, live from SOR headquarters. This is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
We live behind glass curtains and act like nothing's wrong. Soon you will belong.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, and on Spaced Out Radio on iTunes. You can follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, and on Instagram at Dave Scott SOR, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio.
Brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye with the digital spies. They've watched you for so long. I know you're out there somewhere watching me.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
I know you're out there somewhere. We've watched you for so long. Wait for you to fall. We will expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. Little brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye with the digital spies. They've watched you for so long. I know you're out there somewhere watching me.
It's Monday, January 8th, Tuesday, January 9th, if you're on the East Coast or across the pond, and this is Spaced Out Radio. Hope you had a great day and night. I am your host, Dave Scott, live from the Great White North in the Caribou region on top of the snowy mountains of central British Columbia, stationed right here at SOR headquarters. We want to say hello to everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Newnan, Georgia, home of the Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and over 160 countries around the world. We're also live at spacedoutradio.com. The Fringe, FM, Spreaker, Renegade Talk Radio out of Vegas, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Now, we're all over social media. We're on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Listen to us on iHeartRadio in the United States. TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. And, of course, our website is spacedoutradio.com. Now, We have a GoFundMe account going on right now. We are raising funds to improve our studio and rebuild it and get it ready for terrestrial radio. You got to go to GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. That's GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. I want to say thank you so much to our 3 latest people to donate in the last couple of days. 2 of them today. Nancy, thank you so much. Ned Kopsak, thank you as well. And Dennis up at Edmonton, appreciate your contribution as well. Thank you so much for what you are doing. Now, if you head to our website, spacedoutradio.com, we have the Encounter Online where you can read up on everything weird, strange, and paranormal. We got the Spaced Out Radio store. Read up on my latest blog as well. Got some great videos from UFO Seekers, Contact TV, and so much more. Now, we kick off a brand new week on SOR with a trip into the past and present. Ever since this elusive and what many people believe is sinister creature named Mothman began being seen, bad things have happened. Rewind to the 1960s where this strange humanoid-looking winged anomaly was seen flying around, chasing people until the Silver Bridge collapsed, killing dozens in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Now, fast forward to the last couple of years, where some say the Mothman has come out of hibernation and made his way to the northwest into Chicago, where the winged creature has been seen now multiple times. Does this mean disaster for the Windy City is about to happen? From phantomsandmonsters.com, we bring in Lon Strickler, whose brand new book, it can be found on Amazon, is titled Mothman Dynasty, Chicago's Winged Humanoids. Now, to talk about Mothman and other cryptids tonight, the man, the myth, the Mothman legend writer himself, Lon Strickler. Welcome back to Spaced Out Radio, my friend. How was your Christmas and New Year's?
How you doing, Dave? Oh, it was okay. Quiet, which is fine with me.
Yeah, we had a little bit of travel. We had a little bit of travel over the holidays, but we made it home on the 26th, and we are, kicking back and relaxing over New Year's as well. We got the new year underway. Now, when it comes to Mothman, my friend, we're going to get into that very heavily over the next long while, because I believe you're going to try and go the distance with us tonight, which we highly thank you for doing. But for people who are unfamiliar with your work, Lon, how did you get started in all of this cryptid research so many years ago?
Well, I had always been involved with the paranormal because I'm an intuitive. And I discovered that by accident when I was around 8 years old. I was on a private excursion at Gettysburg, which I didn't live really that far from Gettysburg. I used to take my bike, drive my bike out to the battlefield and spend time there. But one summer day, I had I don't know how you describe it, but I just all of a sudden started realizing that there was other energy around me. I was sensing, seeing, smelling, feeling all kinds of different strange, unknown energies. And I was seeing apparitions, smelling gunpowder, hearing bangs, a whole lot of weird things. And I knew that I was able in a way to see weird things I didn't understand. But when it happened that day, it kind of got, I kind of opened my eyes a little bit. And since then, I got interested in doing paranormal investigations. Now, granted, this was when I started doing investigations, I had just gotten out of high school. And this was in the mid-'70s. So, in paranormal investigation wasn't really something that people really thought much about. And at that time, all I did was look for spirit energy, try to help clear properties and other locations. But it was very few and far between. Most of the time, I spent my time researching battlefields and other areas where there had been some type of distress or some type of profound event. So That was all well and good, but later on in May of 1981, I had an encounter with what I thought was a Bigfoot. It was a very tall, hairy being that looked much like what someone would describe as a Neanderthal. This was in Maryland, outside of Sykesville, Maryland. And ever since that time, I have gotten more and more interested in cryptids and unknown beings, including alien research and abductions, and it kind of runs the gamut at this point. So that eventually led to me writing the blog starting in 2005, and Phantoms and Monsters has grown since then, and my research has increased as well.
Did you ever think when you laid down your life plan that this would be what you're known for?
Hardly. Hardly. It wasn't something that I had planned at all. It was one of those things that I really didn't do. You know, I wasn't in the limelight at any degree until I really started writing the blog, and that didn't really take off until maybe after 2010. And so, you know, thanks to social media and such, you know, my work kind of got out there a little bit more.
When you started delving into this, were you surprised, as many people are, Lon, that there was so many different stories of so many different creatures? Because it's very difficult to understand that any of these could really be worthy of attention, considering they're not known or even studied by mainstream science.
Yeah, I suppose I've always had an open mind about these type of things. I had like I said, I had the Bigfoot encounter in 81, and in 1988, I had an encounter with two other individuals of a Mothman-like being here in Pennsylvania. And, you know, I was aware at the time of the sightings that had happened in Point Pleasant. But as far as all types of cryptids, you know, I've always been open to looking into anything that someone would send to me, try to understand what it was. I just didn't limit myself. You know, some people just want to look at Mothman, or some want to look at Bigfoot. You know, I just want to be open-minded about it all, and give the witnesses the benefit of the doubt until I prove there's something, you know, not there, or hopefully maybe something that is there.
Out of all these creatures that you have researched over the years, Lon, how many of them do you actually believe, truly deep down, are real?
I would say a far majority. I really can't put a number on it. I believe the most well-known sightings, in particular the Mothman, flying beings or humanoids, the upright canines, Bigfoot, the flying manta ray type bio UFOs. I believe they're real. I really believe people are seeing these things. I don't think they're seeing apparitions or something that's not flesh and blood, or, you know, something that's not corporal. I mean, I do believe that these things do exist.
Did it take you a long time, though, for yourself personally to accept that the experiences and the sightings that people were having were real, whether it was Mothman, whether it was Dogman, Sasquatch, or whatever? Because I think for the most part, a lot of people will believe in Sasquatch, especially over Dogman. Mothman, we're not sure, but there is proven history with what happened at Point Pleasant. But when you get into some of these real weird, strange creatures, and all you got to do is go over to Ohio to find about a dozen of them, and I don't know what is screwed up about Ohio, I just can't figure that out. It's hard to believe when you hear Goat Man, Frog Man, you know, and all of these different types of creatures that seem right out of a comic book.
I believe that a lot of these strange beings are like a Rust Belt phenomena. I'm talking about Pennsylvania, Ohio, all the upper Midwest. It seems, of course, there are other states that have a lot of other sightings of these cryptids as well. But, I have received most of my reports in and around Pennsylvania, some in Ohio, and Wisconsin and Illinois, of course. And there's just something there. I mean, you listen to the eyewitnesses, you read their accounts, you talk to them. There's something definitely being seen, something going on. It didn't really take me long to start realizing that there was something out there. And I wasn't really, I didn't really believe any of this stuff until I had my first encounter. I guess that may be what it takes for most people. I think that's what got me more, well, I know that's what got me more in touch with this and started looking to it more. And, I believe most of this is true.
I'm a guy who could believe in Sasquatch because I've seen both. I believe in aliens because I've seen them. Ghosts, what the hell? I've had enough experiences with them. What do you tell people, your detractors, Lon, who, and I'm not saying people in this field who are researching, but I'm saying outside of this field, who say, Lon, why are you wasting your time? Why are you going through the motions here? You can't honestly believe all of this crap is real.
Honestly, I don't get much of that. Not as much as I used to. And those I do get, I just kind of ignore them, to be honest with you. I just don't let that bother me.
You figure that you have to have a strong back for this because literally, the criticism that is out there is very, very hard on a lot of people, my friend. It really is. A lot of people can't take the pressure of the criticism that comes along with the research.
Yeah, you've got to let it roll off your back. It really used to bother me at some point, but ever since I've gotten involved with writing the books and my name getting out there with certain investigations, I've just learned that a lot of it has to do with jealousy. I don't like to say that, but it's true. I mean, people are just trying to, if they don't get involved with it with you, say someone wants to help come get involved with your investigation and you kind of tell them thanks, but no thanks, then they start turning into skeptics. And that happens a lot. That happens a lot with a lot of different researchers and investigators. And that's the most of it. So I realize that's what's going on for the most part, and I just don't let it bother me.
Well, let's get into the Mothman then, because I think there's two important points here. I think we got to go back into the past and then work our way to the future here. What makes Mothman, before we get into the whole breakdown of it, such a special creature worth investigating and writing about?
I think just because of its characteristics, in particular the Mothman or the unknown flying being from Point Pleasant. This was something that, it had been known to be seen historically, but as far as when the large number of sightings occurred in and around the Point Pleasant area, and I think Keel had actually looked into maybe 32 sightings that he had documented, though not all of those got into the Mothman prophecies. I mean, that was a large amount of sightings in a small period of time. We're talking about 2 years up into the time of the bridge collapse. I think that's what causes people to really look deeply into something like this. It's just something very unusual. It's unexplainable. There are a lot of theories why it's there, why it happened. Some want to believe it was a harbinger or that it's evil. I don't believe it was any of that. I think the fact that the bridge was going to collapse, Silver Bridge was going to collapse regardless of the Mothman or not, or that it may have, some think it may have been there to give people a warning. I don't think that's either. I think that's just, that was just used kind of as an excuse. You know, John Keel kind of expounded on that as well. It kind of turned into a legend because of that. And of course, it was a major disaster with 46 people dying. I think it was kind of used more of an excuse as anything else. And of course, you know, these sightings of winged beings showing up before the Chernobyl disaster, Fukushima as well. A lot of that information usually comes after the fact. So I'm not really sure if a lot of that is true or not. Though the Chernobyl, there was some previous documentation of a what they called the Chernobyl blackbird. You know, I don't know. I don't know if that was really something that has anything to do with the disaster. But you know, it's an unusual type of cryptid. I mean, it's just something you don't think about, something you don't really. It's hard to believe that something like that really exists in reality, and I think that's what makes it so special.
For people who may not know, because we're always introducing people to what these creatures are, what is Mothman in your best description that you have learned through your studies?
I've always believed that, and you know, ever since I started looking into the sightings in Point Pleasant, I believe it was a summoned being. In other words, I believe it was a flesh and blood creature that was somehow summoned from an alternate reality. And in the case of Point Pleasant, I believe that the energies in Point Pleasant, in particular the Native American energies, spirits, or whatever, there was a strong energy on the earth plane that summoned this being for, some would think, malevolent reasons. It's possible, but I think it was more of a sentry or some type of being that kept an eye out on things, in particular the TNT area at the West Virginia facility. So I don't know. I mean, that's always been my thought. I've talked to a few people in the past who have had experiences at Point Pleasant, who then later experienced a Mothman encounter. It still happens. I mean, you know, in and around Point Pleasant and the county, Mason County, and other counties around there have been sightings over the years, even over into Ohio, down as far south as Chesapeake, or down into Louisville. There have been sightings of this being. So, yeah, I mean, you know, it's something that hasn't really stopped, but it's, I believe it's something that is summoned somehow. And as far as Chicago goes, that's still my best theory for why these beings have been there.
I want to get back to what you said moments ago in regards to it being some sort of harbinger of evil. Does this play into some sort of demonic type creature from the depths of hell, as many would like to believe, or do you think it's something just supernatural that comes around when it's summoned?
Yeah, that's what I think. It's supernatural. I think it's a summoned being. I think a portal or some type of gate opens for whatever reason. There may be malevolent intentions from this person or what the energy that summons it, but the being itself, I don't think, is evil.
So why would it come around during disastrous times if it's not evil?
Well, I mean, it comes around for other times, too. It's just that those particular times, in particular the Silver Bridge collapse, are well documented as being the thoughts of many researchers and the people that lived in the area as why that was there. I just don't really believe that.
So, with the Mothman being a winged humanoid-like creature, a lot of people have stated in their viewing of this creature that it was very large, it was very intimidating, it had these very hellacious-looking red eyes. Were all of these sightings of this creature the exact same? Because when it comes to Bigfoot, for instance, Lon, we see a lot of different characteristics. We see shorter, we see bigger, stockier, fatter, different colored fur or hair, whatever it may be. But with Mothman, is it always the same description?
Well, the being that was seen in Point Pleasant and in the surrounding area, and in particular those sightings that have occurred since then, have been this 6 to 7 foot tall being with deep set red shining eyes that are low into the, not really having a head, kind of into the upper body. Wings described like that as a moth or a butterfly, possibly some type of insectoid type being that would chase on occasion individuals in and around the West Virginia Ordnance Works. Now, other descriptions from other sightings have not given it that aggressive type characteristic. I think that particular being itself was there to protect something in that area of the TNT plant, the West Virginia Ordnance Works. What it was, I don't know, but I do think it's spiritual based.
Do you think that it's almost like the angel of death in a way?
Oh, I wouldn't say that. I just think it's. I don't think it has anything to do with angels or spiritual beings or celestial beings. I think this is something that is either summoned and possibly could be manifested somehow like a thought form. I believe that's also possible. In fact, in the sightings in Chicago, I believe that may very well be a good theory as well, though, we have not been able to pinpoint that.
Let's go back in history here and go back to the 1960s in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, right to the beginning when this creature was first sighted. Could you give us a history lesson, if you don't mind?
Well, yeah, you mean the actual sightings themselves?
The first time that this Mothman came about.
Well, I don't know what exactly was the first sighting. The sightings in and around the TNT plant were the ones that were most well known. I think one of the earliest sightings that was covered by John Keel or investigated by John Keel was a sighting in Gallipolis, Ohio, just across the bridge from Point Pleasant. There were some cattle mutilations, and he kind of thought this may have been something that was related to the Mothman. There wasn't really that much evidence of it, though. Also at the same time, there was a lot of UFO activity going on in and around the area as well. So, of course, people know about the encounter with the teenagers. I think the woman's name was Scarberry, and at the TNT plant, and this thing had, they were in their car, and this thing had got on to the car and scared them. They turned around and headed on down the road to try to get away from it, and it chased them. That was probably the most dramatic encounter, though there had been other encounters as well in the same area. In fact, there was one encounter which is kind of sketchy, where these two individuals had gone into the plant itself and met up and encountered as being inside of the plant itself. But there's not a whole lot of information on that, or much information that I could really be specific about. So, it's that type of thing, and it was almost for a whole 2-year period from early 66 up until, even after the bridge collapse, so where these sightings were documented.
A lot of people say that, it happened near an old chemical weapons facility or weapons facility. Do you think, when you look at that, we hear things like what happened out at Montauk in New York, the Philadelphia experiment, and other things that have gone on, like at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. There's some, very sci-fi type rumors coming out of that base as well. Do you think that maybe this creature could have been some sort of experiment gone wrong, considering that the government has been known, Lon, to play with trying to, create super soldiers of varying degrees?
I think, anything's possible. The Montauk project in particular was somewhat disturbing if it was entirely true. Though there have been other examples of bizarre activity throughout the United States, throughout our history, especially after World War II. You hear a lot of rumors about like the Dulce facility out in New Mexico and other areas out there, the deep underground throughout the west part of the country, and possible experimentation at other facilities. I do believe it's very possible, but as far as these flying beings, it's something that we are definitely looking into. I can tell you that. We have taken steps and have investigated possible connections with some type of government or some type of private involvement. But it's something that's going to take a while, I believe. I'm really not set as far as, saying that something like this did happen, though I will acknowledge it's entirely possible.
Do you believe that the government would stoop so low to try and mix a man with a moth?
I suppose it's probably possible. You've heard people talk about the Goat Man in Maryland, down by the Patuxent Naval Research Area, and seeing a lot of strange things down there and other places. I guess it's possible. I've heard a lot of stories in my time in Maryland as far as Bigfoot research and Bigfoot, the fact that maybe the government was involved with these hairy hominids and some type of hybrids or other type of experimentation. It's frightening. It's hard to believe, but I don't discount anything. I really don't. And, when people come to you and tell you these things and provide you information that you feel is pertinent to look into, it kind of opens your eyes. But, as far as something concrete, I just really can't come out and say that it has happened or is happening. But personally, I do believe it's a very good chance that something has happened like that.
With the creature being humanoid, do you think that this could be a former person? Or maybe a former spirit of a person that is morphed into this? Because, a lot of people, if you go through horror and fantasy, a lot of people say, well, I'll come back and I'm going to haunt you, I'm going to do this, I'm going to cause destruction. Yes, once again, that's all in the horror genre. But do you think that this was maybe an actual real person who's come back?
That's very possible. I do believe in the theory that many aliens or non-terrestrial beings that are seen are actually evolved humans that have come back from the future and have arrived back through some type of portal travel. I do believe that happens. And in fact, I have heard a lot of different things over the years that, make me wonder if that may actually be what's happening. As far as these creatures being some type of bioengineered being, that's very possible, and I believe that is possible.
You work very closely with Butch Witkowski, who comes on this show every month. He's given his opinion that he believes that the flying humanoid is real as well, and that the sightings are just becoming absolutely impeccable to it. When you look at the way, still going back in history with Mothman at Point Pleasant, you mentioned earlier you don't believe that it had anything to do with the collapse of the Silver Bridge, which I believe killed around 46 people. Mm-hmm. Why is that if so many people want to believe that? Is it because it makes the legend more sexy?
I think it was such a horrible incident that in such a small town, a small community, that it was kind of used as a reason why it happened. Other than maybe there was a structural flaw in the bridge itself. I think it was kind of it was put out there, and to be connected with that somehow became a legendary event, and it's continued until this day. I do believe a lot of people truly believe themselves that that did happen. That is the reason for the bridge collapse. I just don't buy into that. I just don't believe that that's what happened. I don't think the being was the cause for the collapse. I don't think the being was there to warn anybody of a disaster. And I think these beings are basically sentries or summoned beings used for possibly a malevolent type of reason, though I don't think the being itself is evil. I think it's comes across into our earth plane for whatever reason, and that's what we are planning to try to determine, and we have been working on and plan to continue working on.
So let's start to move forward to today's day and age, Lon, where the Mothman sightings over the last couple of years seem to have shifted northwest and into Chicago, leading to your book, Mothman Dynasty. And I think it's going to be an incredible read for our listeners who absolutely pick up this book. But when did you start hearing about the rumors that Mothman may have invaded the Windy City?
Well, I got the first report from Manuel Navret over at UFO Clearinghouse. He had contacted me and told me that there was a report in the MUFON CMS as to a sighting in the Oz Park area of Chicago. Now, look, there had been 3 previous sightings in 2011. It was within a 3-month period. There were 3 sightings. They were in 3 different locations. These sightings in themselves were very similar in description of the Mothman, the Point Pleasant Mothman. Very close in description. There was a photograph taken supposedly of this being. It didn't look like anything that fit the description of the Point Pleasant Mothman, though it did look like what people described, or as the witness described, who was a Tasmanian national, that it looked like a large Tasmanian sugar glider. And it did. Basically, it was like a large flying squirrel of some type, or something similar to that. Though it was hard to tell how big it was from the photograph. And so that's where it actually started at. But then again, coming to 2017, the first reported sighting came in April. The sighting that actually was reported came in April. And then beyond that, there were several sightings of a being that looked kind of like a Mothman, like a moth with moth wings. But then some of these sightings kind of were described as owlmen or lacusas. And we had several of those. But as time went on, and the majority of the sightings beyond May up until October of this year, those sightings were of a 6 to 7 foot being with bat-like wings. That was dark in color. Some had red eyes, some didn't. Most were seen flying, some were seen standing, and the wingspan ranged anywhere from 10 to 15 foot.
How tall was this creature that people were seeing?
It went from anywhere from 5.5 to 7 foot.
Is it thin in stature? And does it, I realize the body is humanoid shaped, but are we talking 2 legs here and 2 arms? Are we talking a very muscular type stature, or just a thin type of body?
Overall, the body structure was very thin, very gaunt. In fact, a police officer who had seen this being described as being a malnourished human as far as body size. Had legs, though as far as arms go, there were 2 different descriptions. And this is one of the reasons why I believe there were more than one being. There were at least 3, I think. Some had the arm attached to the wing itself, and then others had detached arms that could move freely without affecting the wings.
That would almost mean like there is other subspecies of this creature.
Yeah, I think there are. I think there are enough variations in different locations, and characteristics from some of the sightings that I believe there were at least 3 of them.
A lot of skeptical people out there will say, how do you know people aren't just making this up for 15 minutes of fame, Lon? How do you know that this just isn't part of their imagination? I mean, a police officer is one thing. We could take some credibility there. But for the rest of the public out there who is apparently seeing this creature, how do we take them seriously to know that they aren't just handing us a bill of goods to maybe get their name in a book or maybe a future movie?
Well, none of these witnesses that we talk to or received reports from wanted any notoriety, which is unusual. Another unusual aspect to these sightings was, say I'd get a report, or Manuel would get a report by email or by phone. And when you ended up talking to these witnesses, they never deviated from their original sighting description. Even when you prompted them, it didn't happen. They just none of them ever deviated from it. That's very unusual. The wide range of people who reported these sightings, I mean, it went through every race, every economical condition as far as people that lived in and around Chicago. It was a wide variety of people, very sincere, many of them very scared, even very emotional when you talk to them. Manuel was able to talk to a few of these people in person. They all displayed fear and that they didn't want their names to be published. We only had one witness out of all the witnesses that agreed to have their name published. So this was unusual.
Do you think that people are just at that point where they are open-minded and they just want to seek the answers and they're willing to just help out Lon in any way they could? Like, there's still actually some good out there as people try to come together to solve that mystery?
Yeah, society nowadays is so absorbed into their life that I'm quite sure there were many other sightings out there that people just, they didn't believe what they saw and were either afraid to report it or just really couldn't care less. Those people that did report it, not all of them knew, well, very few of them knew of what was going on in Chicago. I mean, granted, there were a few that saw an ad that I would put out asking for information on a sighting. They would Google it, and my name would come up. And then they knew that something had been seen in Chicago. But other than that, I just don't believe. Yeah, I do believe that people have maybe, they are open-minded, but they want to know what they saw. They want an explanation. I think that's the biggest thing. I think that's something that's been going on for a long, long time as far as people seeing things. They want an explanation, or they want an answer. And, you can really tell that when you talk to people. They just come right out and say, what did I see? What is going to happen to me? I mean, is this something that's evil, that's going to continue to stalk me or whatever? It's funny. For a period of about 2 months, I guess from July to August in particular, I was receiving up to 20 phone calls, if not more, every day from citizens in Chicago who were scared to death that something was going to happen. I mean, I was getting phone calls 24/7 there for a while. And, these weren't witnesses. These were people that were honestly scared, that believed that this thing existed. They would talk to me and say, I know someone who saw something similar to this, but they're afraid to talk about it. I would try to get them to get the person to contact me, but most of the times they just wouldn't. There were other sightings, but there were a few brave people that decided that it was important to get a hold of us and tell us what they saw.
Why the fear? Why the fear? Are there people out there having so strong, Lon, that if they see this creature, they're wondering if they're going to be part of the haunting and the myth and the mystery?
Well, that's just it. Why? I mean, some of the people that experienced or encountered this thing had a sense of foreboding or fear during the period of time they saw it. Some were physically affected. I mean, there were at least 2 witnesses that literally dropped to their knees when this thing was around. There were others who became very weak, had to sit down. They had physical issues with it. I don't know why people who didn't have an encounter would be fearful. I guess what happened for the most part was some of the media in Chicago started to mention the sightings, and then they started to compare it to the Mothman at Point Pleasant. And people read this. I think that's why they became fearful, because of the Silver Bridge incident.
So there is actually that stigma out there from people in Chicago now who think that because they've seen the Mothman, that they are in trouble. They are going to have something bad to happen to them, almost like an omen has been placed on them.
I hear it all the time, you know. There are a lot of people with that fear.
So how do you calm them down to let them know, or can you even do that?
You know, well, I can't guarantee that something is not going to happen, but I do tell them what I'm telling you tonight. I mean, I just don't believe in the harbinger or portent of disaster theory. I just think that, that nothing will become of it. There have been incidents over the years of people seeing similar beings where nothing has happened. I just don't, I just simply tell them that.
With people who are having these fears, have they had multiple sightings of it, Lon? Or are they looking at just a one-off that was maybe a split second?
I haven't really been able to prove that any of these witnesses saw this more than once. There was one claim in the last sighting of this being that they saw following them. There was another incident many years ago that had occurred in Chicago where this individual claims that this being has been a part of her life for the last 45 years. I can't prove that. As far as that goes, I mean, they did give me locations and dates and such, but I really can't prove that that actually happened. But as far as the sightings this year, it wasn't anything to where it actually happened again, or that they had some type of residual to it. Though the individual who had the first sighting back in March, whose name was Billy Bance, and he was the only individual who allowed us to use his name, he had a lot of medical issues afterwards that had to do with his eyes. Now, there's no proof that it had anything to do with that, and he even says that he doesn't know if it had anything to do with that, but he just thought it was curious. And when I made the report, I did mention that, but I really don't know if there was any connection.
Do you think that Mothman has some sort of special feature which can affect people, much like, I believe in this theory, and I know I'm in the extreme minority here, Lon, but I believe in this theory that Sasquatch has the ability to blur itself or something along those lines, because not everybody is that bad of a photographer or videographer that every photo comes out blurry.
I don't know if that in particular ability is there, but I do believe they have an extrasensory ability that affects people, and I think most cryptids that I've dealt with or researched have this ability as well. In particular, the humanoid type beings, where they can affect the witness in some degree. In the case of Chicago, I believe it had a lot to do with why photographs were not taken. Though most of these sightings were very fleeting, and by the time the camera was, reached for and gotten ready to take the photograph, this thing was gone. But in some instances where there was an opportunity for a photograph, most of the time these witnesses will tell us that was the last thing that was on their mind, and that they were kind of in a state of shock. And that could be for a number of reasons. You don't see things like this flying around all the time. But, I also believe that some people, since they were physically affected by this being and actually stated that, I think it does have the ability to do that.
We have about a minute and a half here before we got to go to break, and I want to get to Steve's question, who just walked in from Australia, listening down under. He is asking, Lon, besides in the United States, what are the other countries that this creature has been seen in?
There have been sightings. Oh, there have been sightings in Canada. There have been related sightings in the UK, in particular the Owlman of Cornwall. That something similar to that. There have been a lot of flying humanoid type sightings all over the world. I documented an interesting case in Japan not too long ago. Australia has had a few. So, yeah, it's just not something that's reported in the United States, though the majority of the sightings have been in the continental U.S.
We'll continue that discussion after our first break of the night, which is coming up here momentarily. Our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio is Lon Strickler. His website, phantomsandmonsters.com. That's phantomsandmonsters.com. His brand new book called The Mothman Dynasty. I highly suggest you head on over to Amazon, you pick it up. These are true tales that Lon has turned into a book that people are having in Chicago right now and over the last number of months. It's a great book indeed. Highly suggest you go pick it up because, hey, if you're a cryptid fan, Lon's your guy. He really is. And if you're a fan of this show and you like Butch Witkowski, well, Lon works very closely with Butch Witkowski from UFO Cop and right here on Spaced Out Radio, the final Monday of every month. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back with hour number 2 right after this.
Hey, space travelers, it's Joe Roop, your host of Spaced Out Saturdays. Come join me as we explore the realms of the paranormal, the esoteric, and everything in between every Saturday night at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. You know the truth is out there. Don't get caught sleepwalking. Come join Spaced Out Saturdays. That's every Saturday night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, right here on spacedoutradio.com.
Psychic Sundays, spiritual communication, ET contact, Sasquatch in your backyard. We will have it all on Cosmic Passport with me, Elizabeth Anglin. Each Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, at spacedoutradio.com, I will take you on a journey of enlightenment. The goal is learning from the soul on out. We'd love it if you joined our experience. Cosmic Passport, heard Sundays at spacedoutradio.com.
365 days a year, we're in the field, investigating UFO sightings, talking to alien abductees, and visiting secret military locations like Area 51. We're UFO Seekers, official partner of Spaced Out Radio. Follow our daily search for the truth at ufoseekers.com or like us on social media. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, we're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At spacedoutradio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to spacedoutradio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Want to learn more about aliens, cover-ups, conspiracies, cryptids, and the paranormal? All you have to do is tune in S4 as we take over Spaced Out Radio Night, starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, each and every Saturday night, right after Spaced Out Saturdays. Hi there, this is Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. Join me, Corey Ruiz, and friends as we discuss the hot topics of the night. It's fun, entertaining, and as dark as the night. Find us at spacedoutradio.com.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from your 4-Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
There's a lot of strange going on in this world, and we can help you find out what's going on with you. Paranormal, cryptids, UFOs in the sky, aliens in your bedroom tickling your toes. We have the investigators you need to find out the answers you deserve. All you have to do is head to spacedoutradio.com. Your information is 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines Report. It's free, and we're here to help.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
Do you want to know what's really going on in your world? Do you have questions about who you can trust in the mainstream media? Then look no further than the Rebel Planet. Come get the straight answers right here at spacedoutradio.com. Join me, Jamie Sexton, creator of Rebel Planet News, as I fill you in on the stories behind the stories. All you truth seekers, be sure to tune in to Rebel Planet on spacedoutradio.com the third Thursday of every month.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to the second hour of Spaced Out Radio. Tonight, I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, Teresa Yanaros is going to join us. We're going to talk magic and divine frequency. We're going to get into a little bit of weird things tomorrow night with Teresa. Maybe even talk a little UFOs and aliens and how it all intertwines, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, in over 160 countries around the world. Good to have you with us as well. We are also live on the Fringe FM, Renegade Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Indubitably is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets the password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, we're on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, follow me at Dave Scott SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio for our archives. We're on iHeartRadio in the United States, TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. Rock out to some Bumblefoot. Shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. Read up on the encounter online and watch great videos from UFO seekers and Contact TV and so much more. We also have a GoFundMe page going right now. GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. We are past our halfway point in helping raise money to build a brand new studio. Everyone, we are going terrestrial. We need your help in order to get on mainstream radio. We have stations lining up who want to pick us up. We got to get this technology. So if you have the ability to share or even donate the post, we would appreciate that. Tonight we are talking with Lon Strickler from phantomsandmonsters.com. Lon is one of the long-time incredible voices of the cryptid field. His latest book is called Mothman Dynasty. It's on Amazon. You can pick it up anytime you like, and maybe if you go to his website, pick it up there. He might even send you an autographed copy. Lon, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
Before we get going too deep in this, I want to get to some audience questions here, because we always like to include our audience questions in hour number 2. In regards to the comment that I made earlier about Bigfoot, and all the blurry pictures and everything, Daryl actually has a question. She says, if these creatures don't blur themselves, then affect your photography equipment to malfunction or batteries to drain. Do you think that's possible, that they may have this ability to make all of these weird, strange phenomena happen with electrical gear?
Yeah, I do believe it's possible. I mean, these cryptids have abilities that we can't understand. I'm sure of that. Like I said before, I believe they have extrasensory abilities to affect either how the witness reacts or how they see them. As far as what an electrical device or a camera reacts to their presence, it may very well be. I mean, it may very well be something to that. I don't have any proof of that, but I'm open to anything. I think that may be possible.
All right, let's get to a question from Psycho here in the Spreaker chat room. He is asking, Lon, in your opinion, which cryptids have the most convincing evidence to be real?
Sasquatch. Sasquatch, I guess, would probably be the best answer. There are a few others where there's no real physical evidence of these beings, but the anecdotal evidence for some is pretty overwhelming, in particular the flying humanoids and the upright canines. Some evidence may seem more real to some people than others, but I have heard so many reports over the years and talked to a lot of people, and I do believe there's something really there. People just are not having the same, or just not imagining these things. I'm not saying that every story is true. There are people that make up stories. We all know that, but I think overall, people are seeing something.
Andrew on Twitter is asking, he says, at one time the manatees were thought by sailors to be mermaids. In the Philippines, there is a massive bat called the giant golden crowned flying fox that from some angles could be mistaken for a human-like figure. Could this type of creature actually be Mothman?
Well, since those sightings or that beast is only in the Philippines, as far as sightings in other areas, I don't think so. But, I am aware the flying fox is, it's a very unusual species. But from what I understand, they do need to be in a tropical environment to thrive. I'm not saying or totally discounting that some of these sightings were natural creatures, but just because of some of the characteristics and the way they reacted, I just don't. In the way they flew, because some of the, very few of these sightings involve the being flapping its wings or needing some type of flapping of the wings to propel themselves. A lot of these sightings detailed the being either hovering without flapping the wings or ascending quickly like a rocket without any of the wings being used. That just doesn't happen in the natural world. So, I'm aware of the flying foxes, and, I mention a lot of that in the book. I do a lot of comparisons of natural creatures, and I just don't believe that's it.
Let's get to Dawn's question, who says, has anyone been attacked by Mothman, and has anyone checked out dates and missing people? Could there be a connection?
Yes and yes. There have been attacks. There was an attack several years ago in the Chicago area of a man and woman who had just moved to Chicago. They were actually of Navajo descent. Their car was attacked by this winged being. The description was very similar to that of the same type of beings that are being seen in Chicago now. When this thing attacked the car, it was able to get a claw through the side window and scratch the woman. They took off, headed for home, and this thing followed them without them knowing it. And when she got out of the car, it actually attacked her. And according to the witness, who was a friend of their son, she had several deep lacerations on her back.
John on Twitter is asking if you have seen Dr. Stephen Greer's movie Sirius, and if so, do you believe the tiny alien body in the movie is real or fake?
I don't believe it. From some of the evidence and some of the information that I have received beyond the movie itself, I don't believe it's real. That's just a personal opinion. I'm not saying that all the bodies or evidence that comes up as far as these small beings or even other types of supposed alien beings are not true, but in that particular instance, I don't think it's real.
Eric is asking, or making a statement here, and it'll follow it up with a question. Says he works with a woman from Point Pleasant, and she claims the Mothman was a hoax to bring in business to an economically depressed area. What do you think about this?
I have never had or seen any indications of that, though I think some of the stories or some of the sightings themselves may have been elaborated to some point. They've definitely taken the people of Point Pleasant, though they're a great bunch of people. They've been through a lot, but I do believe maybe some of the some of the businesses may have taken advantage of that over the years. You know, they had the festival and all this other stuff. I don't think at the time that this was something of concern. It may, you know, I just don't believe that, to be honest with you.
Right before the break, Aussie Steve had asked about these flying humanoids, if they'd been seen anywhere else in the world, which you answered that they've literally been seen almost everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
With these flying humanoids that are being seen in Russia, the UK, even as far as Australia, do they all look the same, or do they all have different features?
There are some variations. But the variations are similar to what the variations were in Chicago. That some of the wings were insectoid, some were like that of an owl or a huge bird, and others were of a bat or a gargoyle-like wing. That was the differences. Size-wise, you know, most of the sizes were in the 5 to 7 foot range. Dark beings. Some would have some hair on the bodies. Some had like a sheen to them. Some had red eyes, some didn't.
All right, let's move on to your book here, Mothman Dynasty, Chicago's Winged Humanoids, that can be found right now on Amazon.com. You have been able to take a lot of these stories and run with them in regards to, you know, what people are saying and what real people are investigating and having happened to them. Was there a story that really stood out for you in all of the reports? Do you have a favorite chapter?
I suppose the encounter on the lakefront by the couple from DC was probably the most dramatic, probably my favorite sighting. This was, and I forget the dates. I'm trying to find it right now, but in other words, this couple who had been visiting Chicago from the District of Columbia were visiting the woman's mother, who lived on Lakeshore Drive. One evening, the couple was out walking along Lakeshore Drive, heading back to the condominium. In fact, they were walking in front of the condominium. As they were approaching Schiller Street, which was a cross street, this winged being, flew in front of them, somewhat above them, quickly coming from the lake direction, went over the trees that were in the front and swooped up the front of the building. And as it got near the top, it kind of hovered like it was looking through one of the windows of the building. When as it hovered there for about 5 seconds or so, it arched back and swooped down toward the trees. By this time, the couple were running on Schiller Street towards the entrance to the condominium. As they were moving along the street, this being, ascended slowly in front of them. It was hovering with its wings spread about 3 or 4 foot above the sidewalk. It was described as having membrane wings like that of a bat, about 12 foot in width. The body was gaunt, but it was about 6 to 7 foot. It had like a sheen to the body, almost like a rubbery-like sheen to it. The witness, stated that she thought it was kind of moist looking. It had long legs with thin feet that were vibrating. They could actually feel the vibration. She actually fell to her knees, lost all control of herself, and it had bright red eyes. It was hovering there for anywhere from 5 to 10 seconds. And in fact, they noticed across the street a flash coming from a camera. So somebody was attempting to take a photograph of this. There was also a delivery guy in a truck. It was like a delivery truck. I don't know if he was actually a delivery guy, but he saw it and he made a comment that they heard as well. A comment of shock and surprise. Well, anyway, after this thing was hovering in front of them, and they were about 15 foot from it, it slowly ascended with the wings spread out. It's very slowly, but it was still vibrating. And in fact, they could feel this vibration coming from it. And when it got to a certain height, it just took off quickly. So, this woman's husband had to actually carry her into the condominium. They called me the next day and contacted me by email. And then I called them and talked to them. They were really shook up. And in fact, they were supposed to leave that day to go back home to DC. But, she told me, she said there was no way she was getting on a plane at that point. She was, I don't know when they left, but they didn't leave that day.
Is that the typical reaction from people, is that it becomes a real emotional ride like that?
Some of the witnesses did experience that. The witnesses that got very close and personal with it did have a reaction like that.
Preacher in the chat room is asking if there is any police reports or other collaborating data in regards to these sightings.
Well, we put 4 Freedom of Information Act requests, sent those to the Chicago Police Department. And this was after we got the report from the police officer and his partner, who had seen this thing in the Gresham neighborhood of Chicago. And there were other people there. In fact, I got a report from one of the witnesses about a week later who verified that the policeman was there and they saw all this. Well, anyway, we put in the FOIA request. And normally when you put in a FOIA request, it takes many weeks to even get a response. All 4 requests were returned with no report was submitted within 2 days. That's unheard of. So they were flagging these things. We have talked to other police officers, off the record, who tell us that they are very aware, the city is very aware of these sightings. The police officers are very aware of these sightings. We had a witness who worked in City Hall. She had the sighting at Ohio Street Beach. And she stated, and she didn't want to give her name or anything, but she stated emphatically that the political machine in Chicago was very aware of what was going on. And that, when we tried to talk city employees, it was hard to even get anything out of anybody. And in fact, I made several requests for videotape in areas where I know there were cameras. And in fact, the condominium where this occurred, there should have been a camera that was looking in the direction of this sighting. And the security company wouldn't even talk to me. So, we got a lot of pushback.
So what you're saying is that there is video evidence out there, but the police and the government officials, in your belief, will not release it for what they'll say is public safety.
I don't know if the city is involved with the security footage, but the security companies and the private individuals who had possibly had videotape would not respond or refuse to give us any access to it.
That's too bad, because sitting on something like that, you would have to think that they were either shut up to do so or just don't want to be involved.
Yeah, I have no indication why. I know the media, through people I talked to in the media, that there was some, they were made aware that the city knew about the sightings. But for whatever reason, some of the bigger media wouldn't report on it, which is not unusual because, you know, they don't like to even report a UFO report, let alone something like this. The reason why the city didn't want this reported, I don't know if it was economical, it was something to do with tourism or whatever. I mean, you know, but they were quite aware of everything.
Why do you think the police in Chicago have been denying this? I mean, they were very open about the incident with the UFO a number of years back at Chicago O'Hare, where it literally blew a round hole through the clouds. And yet with this, they seem so buttoned up.
Well, when you talk to individual police officers, they will acknowledge that there have been sightings. And of course, we had two police officers make reports. We had a Chicago City police officer. Actually, we had three of them. One was a retired. We had a Chicago police officer make report in the Gresham neighborhood. We had a Illinois State Trooper make a report in Calumet Park, and we had a recent report a few weeks ago of a gargoyle-like being very similar to what's been seen in Chicago by a retired police officer who was visiting his mother from Michigan, but I do believe he was a former Chicago City police officer.
There were, I believe, police officers who actually had firsthand sightings of this and went to file a report within the detachment, but there was some sort of issue with that, Lon. Do you have any information on that report?
No, I have nothing. The police officer stated that he did make the report. He told Manuel about it. He said he made the report because he was required to make a report. He thought about not making it, but he did make it, and apparently either got stopped, removed, or whatever. But they're saying they never received it.
Were any children involved in any of the sightings that you were able to report on?
One instance where a woman and her two daughters had an encounter with this being, which was in River Forest. It was near Melrose, but it was the same day as a Melrose sighting. That's the only kids that were involved. Now, some of the sightings in the city where there were crowds, of course, there were children there. But as far as anything reported to us by children, that didn't happen.
So the people who are seeing it, is it all of different age categories? Like, is it seniors? Is it middle-aged people? Is it people in their 20s and early 30s who are having run-ins with this? And do they have any specific ties to the paranormal or the cryptid world that would cause these incidents to happen?
You know, I checked up on these people as best I could, and I saw no connection to paranormal investigations or any other ties to the paranormal at all. They were elderly, they were young adults, Hispanic, African American, Indian, East Indian, all different neighborhoods of the city, different boroughs, even in northwestern Indiana, which is not far from Chicago. Yeah, it kind of ran the gamut. I mean, it was there was no real connection between any of the witnesses as well.
So none of the witnesses knew each other, so this wasn't some sort of collusion happening?
Not that we could find out. I mean, I checked, but there was, nobody knew each other.
Were there ever multiple sightings of this happening, of multiple creatures at the same time?
Just once.
Could you tell us that story?
Yeah, it was out in Lake Michigan. It was off of, it was the northern part of the city. I forget the name of the beach or the part it was. But anyway, they were about a mile and a half off the shoreline, out in the lake. They were in a boat. There were several people. And it was kind of dusk, I guess. It was in the summer, but it was, I guess it was around 8:45, 9 at time, so there was still a little bit of ambient light in the background. But the witness stated that she saw two of these beings flying in tandem and doing circle maneuvers, figure eight maneuvers. Very, very similar in size like the other sightings, but very similar. The pair were very similar to each other. And this occurred for several seconds, and they just took off in the direction of the city. Another aspect of this sighting was there was a what I believe to be a meteorite seen right after, because there was a green flash going across the horizon.
I want to step away from the creature here for a second and get into some of the criticism you have taken personally from people in the cryptid world. You have battled a lot of criticism over this story and being the first to get to it. Why do you think that is?
Well, I believe a lot of it has to do with, I said before, I think a lot of it's jealousy. I really do. There were some investigators in the Chicago area itself that, in fact, one was in our task force, and she got frustrated with me because I wouldn't give her information about the witnesses so she could do her own investigation with it. And she was somewhat aggressive as far as towards the other task force members and kind of made a scene. So after I booted her, she came out and became an instant skeptic with the sightings, and it has been and still is going on radio shows stating that she believes every one of these sightings were fake somehow. So, that kind of thing I just take with a grain of salt. There's another well-known individual who just put a book out about the Mothman at the same time I did, and they gave a book review of it. Not a flattering book review, and it was kind of conflict of interest in my thought. And it also perpetuates some ill-feeling people, followers of them, who also at least one was rebuffed by me. It was an investigator here in Pennsylvania, or supposed investigator, someone who had been looking into the humanoid scenario for years, and they wanted to become part of the task force. And at that time, I already had 10 people on the task force. And I told them, I said, look, if you were living in the Chicago area, I'd be more than welcome to join. But since you're in Pennsylvania and you're not going to be going in the area, I just really don't need your services. I mean, thanks, but no thanks. And he got a little upset about it. So now he's a total skeptic. He's going around telling people that I should be supplying witness information. And the person who wrote the book, and I'm going to say it, Lauren Coleman, he's saying that I should be giving out witness information as well. Well, I just don't do that. And any competent investigator is just not going to go around and revealing personal information about witnesses. unless they agree to it. And, that argument is just ridiculous to me. So, I haven't said much about it. This is really the first time I've really said anything about it on the radio. And, they're entitled to their opinion, but it's not going to deter me from the way I do things.
When you look at the criticism that comes around the field like this, and we see it so often in these fields of research, probably more so than anywhere else, do you think a lot of that criticism is just jealousy, like you say, or, do you feel that you always have to defend your work because of the harassment that seems to continually take place with nonfiction type stories like this?
I very rarely get any pushback from people as far as the subject matter itself. It's mostly from people who think they should be a part of what I do. And, there's not really much you can do about that. It's going to happen. I mean, this, like you said, the paranormal community is full of people who feel that they're entitled to be part of certain investigations and are entitled to certain information, either because they're well known or that they feel they live in an area where they should be given that information. That's just not going to, in my instance, it's just not going to happen. Look, I have no problem supplying data to other researchers for their books or for their research. Anybody who I've dealt with can tell you that. I've supplied a lot of research to a lot of different people for their books, and I'm known to be able to do that. But when people come out and start making these type of accusations just for the sense of spite, I try not to let it bother me. Sure, it bothers me sometimes, but it's when people do this, there's usually an ulterior motive behind it, and I don't really like to comment on it, but it's going to happen, and it's something I've expected. I've known about for a long time, and I've just dealt with it.
Got a great question here from Andrew. He says, recently one of the two young girls who tried to kill their classmate because they wanted to appease Slender Man was sentenced for her crime. This entity was a conjuring of sorts which began as an internet meme. You say that Mothman might also be a conjuring through human consciousness. Could this cryptid be a deep expression of collective human unconscious impulses?
Yeah, that's what we call a thought form, or the other name for it is a tulpa. I believe that's very possible. Poltergeist activity, in particular, is a thought form. Is something that's unconsciously manifested by an individual that's involved with the haunting itself, and this also happens in cryptids, I believe, and I think. Maybe some of these type of sightings can be manifested by individuals unconsciously. As far as the Slender Man goes, I and other researchers have talked about this for years, and these memes that are on the internet, that's a perfect brew or a perfect type of subject for a thought form manifestation. And I don't know if these girls actually manifested this thing physically or it was just in their minds, but they believed it enough that they felt compelled to do its bidding. And but this does happen, and I've written about that in the book as well. I've given examples of scientific research done in that field as far as thought form manifestation. And I think if the energy is there and enough people are involved that can psychically connect to develop something like that, I think it's entirely possible.
Mm-hmm. I can see where that's possible, and where that type of imagery that someone puts in their brain can actually conjure up the spirits. But I mean, with so many different types of winged humanoids being seen, that makes it awfully difficult for me to understand how, if it is being conjured, the creature is so different in multiple different sightings.
In the case of Chicago, I believe if this was done as a thought form, it was an after the fact thing. People were aware of what had been going on previously to that, and may have gotten together somehow and actually manifested this unconsciously or consciously. I believe that's possible. I mean, I believe that's entirely possible. I don't think in all instances this has happened. I don't even know if it happened in one instance, but I can see where it's possible. And it's something we've looked into.
Do you think then that the people who are so-called conjuring this creature know what they're getting into? It would be like conjuring the devil on a Ouija board or something along those lines. Like, how are they conjuring this up?
Well, we did talk to a Wicca in Chicago area who admitted to us that she and another person had conjured up, or possibly conjured up, a being back in 2015. She said she felt compelled to tell us about it, that it may have been something that she had done. I don't know if that's the case or not. I mean, it was worth looking into, but I don't know if that is actually what happened at all. Another aspect of this is the sightings in the little village area. There were overall about 7 sightings in the little village area. And in fact, 6 of those sightings were in an 11-block radius. I believe it's entirely possible, just because of the neighborhood. It's very Hispanic neighborhood, Roman Catholic, but also Santeria and other cult-like, say, religions or cult-like, followings, ritual followings, that maybe a group had done some type of conjuring as well. It seemed awful unusual that so many of these sightings turned up in one area. The area itself has had some issues with drug sales and drug gangs, and many of them are involved with a lot of this cult activity. So was it something that was summoned for protection, or some type of revenge of some type? I don't know. I mean, it's something, like I said, we were looking into it. There may be a connection there. So, when you do something like this, when you start researching something historical, as like these sightings have been, and look, we've had 53 sightings that we can document now. There were others that we just didn't particularly believe, or just didn't have enough information on. But that many sightings in one area within an 8-month period is pretty remarkable, historical. So, when you're investigating something to that degree, you're going to come up with a lot of theories. There's a lot of working theories in this investigation, and it's something that we're going to continue with for a long time.
What's the closest encounter someone had with one of these humanoids?
Well, the one at Lakeshore was probably the closest. But there was an encounter out in Bolingbrook, Illinois, where this woman who takes a regular walk through a neighborhood playground at night, and she was walking through the playground as usual, and she came across what she thought were two people embracing. Now, it was fairly tall, but I think she thought that there was either an umbrella there or something. I don't know. I don't know how she perceived this thing, but anyway, as she got closer to it, she could hear it gurgling, making a gurgling sound, or smacking, a person who smacks their lips together. And as she stood there looking at it, and she was fairly close to it, it turned, and it was very wide, and then she could tell this was one being. She didn't see the wings, but she said it's very possible that they may have been wrapped around it, because it had like that membrane, shiny membrane look to it. Very dark. She saw no face. But I do believe that this thing was sleeping as it was standing. I think that's the reason for the noises. I don't know if it snores or what it did, but anyway, it seemed like it was aware she was there, because she became very weak. Of course, she was fearful of it. She tried to get away. She went around it, went up the path beyond it, but became so weak that she had to sit on the park bench for a little bit time to try to regain her senses. She kept an eye on this thing, but eventually she got up and walked around the other side of the playground and headed for home. Now, when she got home, her son was there. She told him about it. They got in the car while he was driving. They got in the car and went back toward the playground. And he stated that he didn't see this thing as he was driving towards the playground, but suddenly it stood up behind one of the bushes, and he got a quick look at it. And he said he had a strange feeling of like foreboding or fear. So they turned around and went right back home. That's when she got on the phone with me. She called me right away. They got on Google, and she said it took her about 30 minutes to find me on Google, but she called me. That woman was very upset, and her son was upset too. So she never saw a fly or anything like that, but I'm quite sure this was the same being.
Adam is asking, have you ever had a personal encounter with one of these beings?
Yeah, I had an encounter back in 1988 with something very similar to this. I don't know if I described this on your show previously or not, Dave, but this is back in 88 at a Boy Scout camp. I was asked to come out by a friend who knew I was into the paranormal, and he asked if I would come out and do some investigating with him the next weekend. What happened at this Boy Scout camp, some of the Boy Scout troops had been scared away by screaming in the woods, they said it sounded like a child screaming. So they got freaked out and they left the area. So it was reported to the local county Boy Scout group, and when I ran into him, he told me about it, and he said, he and my friend and I are going out there this weekend. Would you like to come along and stay out there with us? I went on up there. This was at Camp Conawago. This was actually about 10 miles northeast of Gettysburg, maybe about 15 miles north of me, where I'm at right now, here in Hanover. So we camped out in the woods that night. This was a Friday night. Got out there, didn't see anything, didn't hear anything. Though that night, while we were in our tent sleeping, we each had a tent, so it was 3 tents. we heard something moving outside around the campground. Now, I thought one of them was going into the latrine or, whatever, to relieve themselves. But the other guy, whose name was John, he mentioned it to him, and he told me, no, I noticed, I heard something, but I didn't know, didn't think much about it. And this area has a lot of white-tailed deer, raccoons, and such. So, it wouldn't be unusual for one to wander in the campsite. Well, anyway, the next morning we got up, and it was pretty nice. This was the fall. It was in October, so we hiked out into the woods all day. We got back about 6 o'clock that evening, sat around the campfire, ate, talked. We were talking football, I think, most of the night. So we heard, I don't know what time it was, I'd say around 10 o'clock, we heard something scream. And it sounded like well, at first I didn't know what it was. It could have been an owl or something screaming. There are a lot of things out in the woods that make a lot of different sounds, but we heard it again. It was definitely sounded like a child screaming. It was kind of moving in and out. So we were sitting around after that happened, and I got up around, I guess, about 1 o'clock in the morning and started walking around, and I just felt weird. I felt like something was watching us. You get that feeling that something's watching you. So I came back. I told them about it. So we each went out along the trail, which is along the Conewago Creek. We didn't get more than 50 foot away from the camp, and when we all noticed something standing in the creek. And when we looked over there, all you could see was kind of an outline in the moonlight and these two bright lights. And this thing was standing in the middle of the creek, which was very shallow at that point. And it shot up in the air. And like I said, we didn't get a good look at it. It was gone before we put the flashlights on it. And this thing took off like a rocket. And we heard this screaming sound going away from us. So we went back to camp. The one guy, my friend Andy, he was freaked. He was really bad. So he ended up having to go into and spend the night at the administration building that night. Him and John both went. They both acknowledged seeing the red eyes. But I wanted to see what it was. I mean, I was hoping I could get a better look at it, but I stayed up most of the night, the rest of the night, and I didn't see anything else. But this being I have dubbed the Conewago Phantom, and it's interesting. That was back in '88. So when I started writing the blog, I hadn't told too many people about the sighting, but when I started writing the blog, I guess about 2008, I decided to report about what happened. So I put the report in the blog. I got a letter not long after. Well, I got a response not long after from a gentleman at Dick's Dam, which is like a mile downstream or upstream from our sighting, and he told me that he had been hearing those screams for years. Now, this is 20 years after I had my sighting. So I said he'd been hearing that screaming sound for years. He had no idea what it was. He hadn't seen anything. So maybe a week or so after I received his report, I got another comment from a scout troop leader. And he stated to me, he said, this is pretty unusual. We were around the same area where you were when you were camping. And this happened several weeks ago. We were out, and the boys in my troop came running back to our campsite and said what they saw or described as a dragon. That was a winged dragon out in out of the trail. They said they thought it had feathers, but it also looked like a dragon. He thought that they were pulling his leg, so he didn't make much of it. He said they were upset, but he didn't think much of it. So anyway, he said when he saw what I had written, then he knew they saw something. So over the years now, and I guess the last sighting was approximately about 2.5 years ago, but up and down the Conewaga Creek, there have been 5 other sightings of something very similar to this that people had reported to me over the years.
We only have about 1.5 minutes left, Lon, until we're going to go to our second and final break of the night. When you wrap it all up, because in the next hour I want to get to some other cryptids that you have been working on, when you wrap it all up with the Mothman, do you see this as a scenario that is going to continue in Chicago, in your professional opinion, or do you see this rash of sightings that is just going to disappear, much like they did from West Virginia?
I believe it's going to continue. I have some indication to where I believe it's going to continue. Not necessarily in Chicago, but I think it's going to continue in another area. It being an urban area, I can't say that for sure. You know, around the same time we've had these sightings in Chicago, we've also had a pair of sightings down in Pasco County, Florida. Very unusual group of sightings down there. A sighting I just received from Ohio of a similar being that was actually hit by a truck, a delivery truck at night, and the driver got a real good look at it. Apparently there was no damage on the truck, but this thing got up and flew off, but it was very dramatic. And also a similar sighting in a location just south of Austin, Texas. So, you know, these things have been seen in other places as well. Now, you know, I'm not saying it's not going to show up in Chicago again.
Right.
It may very well do that, but I think it's going to continue somewhere.
All right, Lon, I'm going to get you to hold on here as we're going to hop out for our final break of the night. Lon Strickler is our guest. Phantomsandmonsters.com is his website. We're talking about his new book, Mothman Dynasty. It can be found on Amazon.com. And, of course, we're going to talk more cryptids right after this.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
There's stories, then there's the truth. Do any of us really trust the news anymore? This is Jamie Sexton, owner of Rebel Planet News. The third Thursday of every month, I appear on SpacedOutRadio.com to bring you the truth you deserve, without mainstream media lies or alternative media fear-mongering. We'll get to the heart of the story and deliver the truth you are seeking. So come join us here for the Rebel Planet at SpacedOutRadio.com.
We are lighting the void on Saturday nights on Spaced Out Radio. Hey, this is Joe Roop, and I'm hanging out in SOR headquarters every Saturday night, bringing you the latest news when it comes to the weird and strange. Bigfoot, occult, UFOs, ghosts, and everything in between, I got you covered. You can tune in to SpacedOutRadio.com starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. Come travel into the void with us on Spaced Out Saturdays.
Not ready for bed on Saturday night? Right after Spaced Out Saturdays, hop on over to S4 with Corey Ruiz and me, Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. With S4, there are no limits to what we try and uncover. From government conspiracies to helping clean up the paranormal, no topic is safe on S4. We get to the heart of the matter, of the subjects you want to learn more about. So tune in on S4 starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, only on SpacedOutRadio.com.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
Hi there. I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories, from alien encounters to the latest conspiracies. You won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter Online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Do you want to know the truth? Do UFOs exist? Are aliens real? Are the governments hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO seekers, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow along with us as we journey across the United States, visiting UFO hotspots and alien hotspots, trying to document the UFO phenomenon. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
There's a lot of strange going on in this world, and we can help you find out what's going on with you. Paranormal, cryptids, UFOs in the sky, aliens in your bedroom tickling your toes. We have the investigators you need to find out the answers you deserve. All you have to do is head to spacedoutradio.com. Your information is 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines Report. It's free, and we're here to help.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories.
It's Cosmic Sundays with me, Elizabeth Anglin, in Cosmic Passport. Let me take you down a 3-hour spiritual journey where we will get into everything from ET contact to Psychic Sundays. It's a journey of listening and learning together with some of the best professionals in their fields. You can tune in to Cosmic Passport at spacedoutradio.com every Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, Teresa Yanaros is going to join us. We're talking magic and divine frequency. We'll probably get into the whole UFO phenomena as well. We get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Newnan, Georgia, home of the Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and over 160 countries around the world. We're also live on the Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Vegas, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Indubitably is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, we're all over social media. You can find us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, follow me at Dave Scott SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio to hear our archives. We're on iHeartRadio in the United States. TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including shopping at the Spaced Out Radio store, rocking out to some Bumblefoot, reading up on the encounter online, and watching great videos from UFO seekers and Contact TV, and so much more at spacedoutradio.com. For the final time tonight, we introduce Lon Strickler from phantomsandmonsters.com. His latest book, Mothman Dynasty, can be found on Amazon.com right now. We appreciate you checking that out. Lon, welcome back.
Thanks again, Dave.
A couple of questions from the previous 2 hours that we've been talking about Mothman, and we're going to get into other cryptids and other scenarios as well this hour. Gloria is asking, can a tulpa be conjured by just one person, or does it take multiple people to do so?
Yeah, it can be manifested by one individual or group of people. Poltergeist activity, which is basically a tulpa or a thought form, is manifested by one individual. So, as far as a cryptid or something else that's able to be seen, I believe it can be done by one person, yeah.
All right, let's get to Andrew's question on Twitter. He says, or he is asking, could someone in the deep state be experimenting with people's unconscious without folks knowing it? Is someone trying to incite fear by directing consciousness to manifest these cryptids?
I believe it's possible. There have been allegations over the years of government programs that have been able to do something like that. I mean, of course, some of the programs that was run by the CIA back in the 60s and 70s had some of that to it. I believe it still goes on. It's entirely possible.
Let's move on here. In regards to a lot of the cryptids and weird stories that you investigate, what's your number one topic that you enjoy? Is it Mothman? Is it Dogman? The werewolf sightings out of Pennsylvania with Butch? Is it Bigfoot? What do you really love covering in this field?
It's been the flying humanoids, winged humanoids overall. That's something that I've really been engaged in. The upright canines are fascinating. I mean, this is a phenomena I can't even get close to explaining. I don't even know how I would react with one of those things if I had an encounter. But yeah, I would say it's the flying humanoids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. On your website, phantomsandmonsters.com, on the opening page, as I was researching you today, you got this story about confronting our doppelgangers. For a lot of people who don't know, explain what a doppelganger is.
Well, I guess it could be described as a person's body double. There are theories that these doppelgangers or body doubles are from an alternate reality that possibly are seen at certain periods. There has been association with doppelgangers in spirit, to where a person saw a spirit that looked like them. It runs the range of paranormal phenomena, but it's always a body double or a type of being or apparition that looks like the person that sees it.
I had a dream about 1.5 years ago in regards to meeting up with myself, which I'm going to say on a parallel plane, Lon, where my wife was with me, and we walked into, I don't even know where it was. It was like real old town, Main Street, USA type of a town. The street lights were very dim. It almost looked like it was black and white. And I actually ran into myself on a street corner, but it was actually the evil side of me. And I remember Evil Dave telling me that if I wasn't who I was, he would have probably killed me that night. And it was very dark and it was very dreary. I've never had anything like that happen before in my life, nor had I heard any other types of examples like that until it happened to me. When you hear a story like that, would that be considered in the doppelganger realm, or just a different dimensional type story, or maybe just a dream?
Yeah, it would be in that realm. I mean, I hear a lot of those stories, something similar to that, where a person meets up with their other reality. And I believe it does happen. I mean, I have gotten a lot of eyewitness reports in regards to this, either through dreams or, just in everyday life. Why it happens, I don't know. It's, could this be something that's a thought form also? Could this something to be that is manifested by the person itself? Absolutely. But I think there's a little bit more to it. I think it's a more spiritual thing as opposed to just something coming from an alternate reality. But I also believe that the interaction with another reality is also possible.
You mentioned that you had heard a lot of stories like that before, and they are quite similar. Are people being attacked by their doppelganger self in those different realms?
No, I've rarely heard anything like that. It's usually encountering the doppelganger by accident, or and I'm talking about in dreams now. Very rarely coming face to face, but seeing that and acknowledging that they saw each other, but that this doppelganger does not want to have anything to do with the person.
So when it happens on this plane, then, where people are running into themselves, are they knowing who this other person is? Is there any type of familiar encounter or familiar status about that encounter?
Usually the physical aspects are very similar, but the emotional or mental aspects, personality is much different.
And what do you mean by that? Is that just because they're two separate people who just happen to look alike, or is it is there a further connection spiritually that causes that?
I don't know. That's a question that remains unknown. I believe alter egos are kind of the basis for doppelgangers. Like the split personality, the good and the evil, or the good and the bad, or the meek and the aggressive. I think that has some tie into it.
Moving on here, a lot of people believe that doppelgangers are actually some sort of angel that come down to visit you and to help you out. Do you think there is something religious behind the doppelganger sightings?
Well, I'm not a very religious person. I mean, as far as religion goes, organized religion, I believe deeply in angels and spirits, celestial spirits. I have never heard of any perceived angel being a doppelganger, something similar to the person. I don't think there's any connection there.
All right, moving on, we have a question from our audience here, and this is from Matt. He is wondering if there's any new news coming out of the whole Montauk experience.
Well, there was a recent series on television about what was supposed that had happened during the Montauk project. Other than that, I really don't know much else that has been said. It's kind of a convoluted situation. I don't really know what to believe as far as what was described in the documentary. I have read over the years certain things about it, but I don't know. A lot of what has been described is difficult for me to believe. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't happen overall, but as far as that particular project, I'm not really sure everything that was perceived to happen actually did happen.
Where do you find fact from fallacy on that?
Well, the individuals involved with it in particular, I mean, there's some sketchy backgrounds with a lot of these people, and I just don't feel they're truthful about what they're putting out there.
Let's move over to Bigfoot here, because 2017, it seemed that Bigfoot became more popular than Dogman again after Dogman seemed to really take over in 2016, as the cryptids always seem to have a year of popularity. Did you see a rise in Bigfoot sightings in 2017?
No, in fact, 2017 was pretty tame. I mean, we didn't, our group and a few other groups around Pennsylvania in particular didn't really get a whole lot of reports. This was a very slow year. And in fact, all cryptid activity in Pennsylvania in particular was pretty slow. There was a lot of UFO activity, orb activity, UFO activity, other unexplained incidents, paranormal, spiritual. That was alive and well. But as far as other phenomena like cryptids in particular, that it's been kind of a slow year for that.
Why do you think it was such a slow year in the cryptid research? Were more people not reporting? Were more people just not having the experiences? Or do you think that these creatures moved into more solitary areas?
I really don't know. It's hard to explain 2017 overall anyway. It's been kind of an odd year in a lot of different aspects. In my case in particular, the Chicago sightings kind of took up most of the year. But, if you've talked to Butch as well, We just were not receiving that many reports. I believe in 2017 now we've gotten 2 reports of upright canines. There have been scattered Bigfoot reports, but nothing conclusive, nothing very good evidence. We've had some tracks and a few other things, but nothing that stood out. But like I said, again, UFO activity, and particularly in this part of the state, the south central and central part of Pennsylvania, has been pretty active.
What about the rest of the country? Because here on the West Coast, it seemed with all the fires that were happening here throughout the year that it was difficult to get many sightings happening.
Yeah, I haven't heard a whole lot. I mean, overall, I have not heard a lot. I've had some flying humanoid reports, like I said earlier, but other activity, it just really has not been that much going on 2017. Beyond what's been going on in Chicago, I haven't really been getting a lot of, new information about much of anything. It's been sometimes pretty hard to get reports and any new updates on phenomena. In my instance, it's been a slow year.
Could it be because there are so many people researching now and there's so many different options of where to send the research?
That may be, but I think overall there were a lot of other things with people's mind this year. I don't really want to get involved in politics or anything else like that, but I just think people were more involved with other things. They had more things in their mind. I don't know if it was less people out and about or less opportunity to see different phenomena. I really don't know. We've talked about this. Butch, Sean, and myself have talked about this, and we're convinced that the activity overall has just waned off. Why it's happened, we've asked other people, and there doesn't really seem to be that a very good explanation for it.
Do you think then that because of the downturn in sightings, that maybe these creatures are very much becoming more used to or wanting to stay away from mankind then?
Oh, that's entirely possible. I mean, there may very well be a reason behind it. I had noticed over the recent years, that the Bigfoot reports in particular have been, the reports themselves, the creature seemed to act surprised when they realized that the witness was looking at them. That was something that Stan Gordon and I have been talking about for the last couple of years. The sightings themselves have been fairly odd. Also, orb activity around cryptid sightings has picked up as well. We've had the sightings that have gone on in Pennsylvania over the past 2 or 3 years. A lot of times included orb activity. Even after the sighting itself, when an investigator would go out to the area, they would notice orb activity in the area. Now, that may very well be a connection there. It seems like there may be. It may very well be. Are the phenomena becoming more tied to each other? Is the uptake in UFO activity a result of less activity, less sightings of cryptids? It's hard to tell. But I have always thought that paranormal phenomena was connected to some degree. I have always thought that.
Have you been able to catch Todd Standing's recent Discovering Bigfoot documentary on Netflix?
Yeah, I watched it.
What did you think?
I've had a lot of questions about Todd Standing's research. The fact that he got Jeff Meldrum and John Bindernagel out there, I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know how much commitment they had to Todd as well. Sometimes if you watch the documentary, it seems sometimes they seem reluctant to even agree with what was going on. It was an odd film. It really was. Where he would make claims of footprints in the soft moss. Well, that's questionable. His films over the years of supposed Sasquatch. I've been saying for years it looks like the Ewoks. It doesn't look like anything natural to me. But then again, who knows? Who am I to judge what someone else considers research or investigation? I have an opinion, but I'm not going to come out and say the guy's outright lying. It's just very questionable.
The one thing that I didn't appreciate with it is the fact that, to me, it seemed like Todd was trying to force his opinion on Jeff and Dr. Bindernagel to agree on what he was saying. Like he was trying to force them to say yes, and at times, to me, it was very uncomfortable. And I'm not saying that to be highly critical of it, but this is obviously what was happening during the video. And I know other people who have watched it, people who have, more experience than I do and a lot less, and they felt very uncomfortable with it as well. Did you feel that he was trying to force some answers?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's exactly how I felt. It just seemed to me that both Jeff and John were kind of reluctant to go along with agreeing with standing, and that they just gave their affirmative just to keep him pleased. That's the way I felt.
Yeah, I was the same way, and it just seems like. The other thing that a good friend of mine brought up in regards to the whole video of it all, it seemed that every time something was happening, Todd just happened to be standing in front of the camera. And you had to look into the distance in the background, like with the hands grabbing the apples. It really didn't sit well. Like, of course, the apples are going to be grabbed when Todd is standing in front of the camera. He knows where the camera is. Why would you stand in front of it if that one is specifically about watching the apples that are sitting on the fallen over tree?
Yeah, that whole scenario was suspect to me. I just had a hard time believing it. It looked like it was staged somewhat. And, you're right. He did seem to be at the right place at the right time. If the encounters that he described actually occurred, I really don't believe most people would have gone back out there again and subjected themselves to what he described. The fact that he had 3 huge Bigfoot Sasquatch surrounding him and threatening him, and he decides, well, I'm just going to keep going out. Nah, that just seems too weird to me. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but it was. I don't know. It seemed embellished.
Well, the one thing that I thought of during that film that I found very perplexing was the fact that, in one hand he's talking about how aggressive these creatures are and how they could tear him apart in an instant, and how vicious they are, yet on the same breath he is discussing with how these creatures are very friendly and cordial, and they are very, tame to him being around. So I'm trying to figure out which angle are you going with, that they are a creature that can absolutely, rip you apart at any second, even though they aren't getting close to you, or is it something where, they are a peaceful type creature who is just as curious as to figuring out why you're in their territory?
Yeah, it was convoluted. I mean, I agree with you. You don't come away from watching that video coming away with the impression that what he was telling you actually happened. I've known a lot of researchers over the years, and I've heard a lot of stories, but I don't know. I guess he's dedicated, and he's got, he really seems to work too hard at trying to make people believe what's going on. Almost to the point where, it seems fanciful, and you're right, where he says that these things could just easily kill him, but they're so gentle. I mean, come on. It's, and why would anybody put themselves in that position if that was the case?
Alone with no weapons.
Absolutely.
And then chase them down.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. We have a question on Twitter at #SpacedOutRadio from Les, who is asking, we seem to be losing a hiker or two every couple weeks here in Oregon. Is Bigfoot really hungry these last few weeks? Do you have any insight in regards to these scenarios?
This is something that David Pilates has been talking about for a long time. I've heard stories for years about people that just suddenly vanish instantly. I don't think you can blame it on Sasquatch. I believe there are time traps, portals, or whatever that people can actually get into and not be able to recover from. I believe that's absolutely possible. I'm not saying that, maybe there are animal attacks or something has been taking them, alien abduction. Maybe that's possible. The fact that it happens out in the wilderness like that, in areas that are wilderness, and people just seem to vanish. There are a lot of theories about what it could be. Could Sasquatch be involved with some of that? Yeah, I believe it could happen. I think in British Columbia in particular, some of the disappearances on that stretch of highway up there, I believe there's some Sasquatch activity going on there too. It's not been proven, but it just seems that way. There's very little trace of people. So, I guess the Bigfoot would be able to do that. But I think there are other explanations as well.
I'll give you a little tidbit on the information on the Highway of Tears. That's the highway you're talking about.
Right.
A few years ago, before I even started this show, I had a First Nations woman in my daytime office. And this was a few months after I had had my Bigfoot sighting of two of the creatures within 100 feet of me. And doing my own little very amateur research that I was doing at that point, her and I started talking about Sasquatch, and I said, I don't mean to be rude or disrespectful here, but I am wondering, because there has been a lot of reports out of the Chehalis First Nation down near Harrison Mills, where there's a lot of Sasquatch sightings in British Columbia, of Sasquatch trying to take the females. In fact, for a long time, the tribe had a rule that none of the women were to go out after dusk because Sasquatch would kidnap you to make you a wife. And so I asked her about that, and I said, do you think, I think some of these women up north actually have been taken by Sasquatch. And she actually said to me, she goes, believe it or not, First Nations people agree with that. She goes, we're not saying that there isn't a mass murderer up there, a serial killer. She goes, but we believe that 20 to 25%, maybe 30% of the women that have been taken by Sasquatch. And she said one of the interesting statistics about this, Lon, was the fact that the majority of the women who were taken were within either pregnant, on their period or menstrual cycle, or within or post 1 year of giving birth. And according to the First Nations up here, Sasquatch has a real affinity for the smell of a woman's body around pregnancy or that time of the month. And and that's what set Sasquatch off to take one of these ladies. Because when you drive up here, my friend, okay, I did a 45-minute drive north to me to the next town today, and it is barren. Sure, there's some houses scattered, but it is barren. You're surrounded by forest and mountains. It would be easy for anything to happen. And the higher north you go, the more thick the forest gets. And I just think it's an incredible theory, and that you brought it up. I wanted to pass that information on to you about that.
Yeah, I have heard that over the years from a lot of different indigenous people. I've heard it from tribes in Canada, like you said, out in your area, out in British Columbia, U.S. Pacific Northwest, Ontario, the upper Midwest, and I've also heard it down into the Navajo and Apache nations in Arizona and New Mexico as well. It does seem to be a trend there. And their tradition, even though you don't hear a whole lot about it, I think includes a lot of that. They don't like to talk about it a lot. In particular, down in the Navajo Nation, they don't like to talk about it, but there's something to that. I really do believe
it. So, with Sasquatch, do you think this is a supernatural type creature, or do you think that it is a creature that is some sort of animal that is roaming the North American forest?
I think certain areas it may be an actual indigenous creature, flesh and blood creature. I think it's flesh and blood wherever, but I think in certain areas, especially here in Pennsylvania, in the Mid-Atlantic, a little more east, a little more west into Ohio and such, I don't believe these creatures are part of any type of indigenous species. I think they are interdimensional, but are flesh and blood. And I also believe there's a very good possibility, because I was involved with a habituation in Nova Scotia for several years, where the individual was telling me how he had seen these beings actually disembarking from craft, UFO craft, in particular large orbed craft. And some of the activity he described to me was very convincing. It was odd, but it was convincing. And, there have been stories here in Pennsylvania of UFO and Bigfoot activity, happening at the same time, in particular in the Chestnut Ridge area of Pennsylvania. So I believe a lot of what is seen in this part of the country, in the east part of the United States, is possibly interdimensional. But I do believe there are also areas where there are indigenous species. Florida, Louisiana, Arkansas, Texas, Southwest and the northwest part of the United States up into Canada. And I think most of what's seen in Canada is actually indigenous as well.
So how do you explain then when it comes to Bigfoot, and I asked you this in hour number 1, about all the blurry videos and photographs that are taken, because not everybody is that bad of a photographer. Do you think that Bigfoot has some sort of cloaking type ability to make itself look more, blurry towards technology?
I think it's more of an influence towards the individuals taking the picture, to where they can't stay still or kind of move about and causes a blurry image. Though there have been several of the stationary photo traps that have also been blurry. I don't know. I mean, do you think these things move fast enough that they cause blurriness? I don't know. It's hard to tell. There may very well be something to that, though.
I honestly think there is. And I don't know why. I don't have any facts. It's just a personal opinion on that. Because, let's face it. If I see a Sasquatch lurking in the trees around and I grab a picture, why is it blurry? Yet I can take a picture of of deer in my backyard from the same area, and that photo is clear. Now, granted, apples and oranges when it comes to the creatures, and when you see something that big, I think, people are going to panic in regards to it. But for almost everything to be grainy and, like we're using 1984 camcorders from Sony, it's ridiculous with today's technology that we're still getting these grainy, pixelated type videos and photos.
Yeah, there's a lot to cryptid activity that we can't explain. There is something that I believe, some abilities that they have that we just have no idea what it is. I mean, we can speculate, and but yeah, you're right. I mean, it does seem that 90% of the photos are just terrible. And I can't explain that. I really can't.
And that's, I think, the issue that the mainstream really has when it comes to creatures like Sasquatch. Because here they're wanting proof, but everything seems so 1984 in the film quality or the photo quality. And it's like, come on, there has to be something more to this, with the pixelation, with this creature, because, like I said, a lot of people are going to disagree with me. I know I'm in the minority with this type of thinking. It just doesn't make sense. And until that is ruled out, I'm sticking with it.
Well, I'd like to tell the story of, someone I'm very confident of, and it's been a researcher of Sasquatch for many, many years, and someone I can really trust. And he was telling me a story of a creature, of a Bigfoot that he saw up in the Sierras on the California side. And he followed this thing, and he got fairly close to where he can make out what it was. And this thing just suddenly disappeared on him. I mean, right in front of his eyes. And there was no way this thing ducked in somewhere. It just simply disappeared. And that's not the first time I've heard that. But the fact he said that to me, really, really hits home. I hear it from a lot of people, about this creature. It seems to be able to either cloak or just disappear or camouflage itself somehow to where, we have no idea where it went, what happened to it. There's a lot of questions about these beings. There really is. And as far as what you're stating with the photographs, anything would not surprise.